Well, it's been a couple of weeks since my family and I have been here, and if we haven't met, my name is Randy, and I get the opportunity to be the campus pastor here and just be a part of I'm just one of the leaders that helps make this place happen, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Charlie and Lisette and Becky and Kevin and Megan and all the folks that make our church work week in and week out. I probably shouldn't have started naming names because there's a lot of people that make it go. And just a huge shout out to all those folks. Thank you for allowing us to get away for a couple weeks and get some rest. And if you weren't here last week, you missed an amazing picture of me sleeping on the beach. And so, my wife betrayed me, and we're working through it. No, exactly. But it's great to see you again. If we haven't met, I would love to be able to meet you in person and just say hi and get to know you a little bit. Chances are you've had a chance to get to know some of our leaders and other folks, and we have some amazing people. We are one church in many locations, and so South Hills, we have a bunch of different campuses, and we were the first one outside of California, and so that's pretty cool. You're going to hear a little bit about our Kenya campus this morning from our senior pastor here in just a minute, because we're actually sending a team of folks, a collection of people from different campuses who were able to go on a missions trip. They're getting ready to leave to go to Kenya, and so you're going to get a little bit of an update about that. But closer to home, if you're here, we would love for you to get connected. I mentioned the Connect card earlier. There's also a card in there that just in the little packet that you received that just says Next Steps on it. Maybe the best step that you could take here at our church is downloading an app called the Church Center app. It's available on both app stores. Everything that you would like to do or want to know or find out about, you can get connected through the Church Center app when it comes to our church. You can stream past messages, you can check your kids in, you can find information about small groups on there as they kick up in the fall. We have a couple of events that are coming up this summer that you can get connected with as well. In fact, one of them is we actually have a new summer shirt merch that we put together, and you can actually go on the Church Center app and order one on there and pay for it. We are actually going to be placing that order in just a couple of weeks, and so we don't miss out. Get one of our awesome shirts. Isn't that fantastic? I love that shirt. And so you can do that on the Church Center app. Also, later on, and in fact, just a couple weeks from now, we're going to be floating the river on Saturday, July 20th. And so we're going to meet at Barber Park at 9:30. You can bring all of your own stuff. If you don't have anything, that's okay. They rent tubes and rafts and all that good stuff right there at Barber Park, and then we'll float and you pull out at Ann Morrison. We did this a couple years ago. It was a lot of fun. We pulled all the stuff out, and you just kind of, the folks are there to pick it all up, and then we just hung out in the park and had a picnic and just had a lot of fun. So we would love for you and your family to join us. There's going to be a couple other things coming up in August, but we would love for you to join us and float the river and have a good time with us. All right, we are going to worship God through our giving, and so I'm going to invite the ushers to go ahead and come on forward. There are 4 different ways that you can give here at our church. 2 are electronic. You can give through the Church Center app, which I mentioned a second ago. You can also go to our website, southhills.org/give. Many of you, in fact, most of us that give on a regular basis, give electronically, so thank you so much for being a part of what God's doing at our church. But you don't have to give that way. You can give here. You can drop something in the bucket. We also have a drop box at the Connect counter if you'd like to do that as well. But thanks for being a part of what God is doing here. We actually we just finished our fiscal year at the end of June, and we finished way ahead of where we budgeted for our giving for this last year. And that happens because of the sacrifice of people right here in this room and you guys giving so that our church can be possible. And so thanks for being a part of making that happen. Why don't we pray together? We'll pass the buckets, and then we'll hear from our senior pastor. God, we love you. Thank you for the time away for me and my family, but God, it's just incredible and so wonderful to be back with our church family. And Lord, I am so grateful to be a part of a place where people serve and give and contribute, God, where we're building a place where our friends and family, where our neighbors, the people of this community in this valley can experience the love of Jesus. So God, when we give, that's what we're giving to. God, we're not giving to a person. We're not even giving to an organization. God, we're giving to create a place where the people that we love, the people we care about, the people that you love can experience the truth of who Jesus is. Thank you for your generosity to us. God, we give back a little of what you've shared with us. Thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. Ushers, please go ahead.
As many of you know, South Hills is one church in multiple locations. We have multiple campuses all through the U.S., and we also have a campus in Africa, Kenya specifically, in a town called Chumbi, which is about an hour and a half outside of a big city called Nairobi. We, as a South Hills team, actually are sending a team to our global campus to go do missions work with our campus pastor there, Pastor Philip, working with an organization called Tumaini. But we also as a church want to be able to bless families that are in need there. And so here at South Hills, when we do our giving every week, we let people know that the reason why we give is because we want to be obedient to God's word, and we want God to have his anointing on our finances. But on top of our giving, we also do something called Above and Beyond. This is an intentional initiative towards giving towards our local and global communities. I want to be able to challenge us as a church to do something huge. I want South Hills Church to build a house for a family in need. We can do it for $4,000. That's what it costs to build a home in Kenya. Here's what else I'd like to do. In these areas, there's also families that are struggling financially, and a lot of their wealth comes in cattle. I would like for South Hills Church to buy a cow for a family. $265 buys a cow for an entire family. And that's not it. We also want to keep going down the list. Some of us may be able to purchase a goat for a family. What does a goat cost? $65. And the smallest amount is buying a chicken. A chicken costs $25. And so what I would love for you to do is pray about what would you be able to contribute towards this movement, towards this mission trip through Above and Beyond. It has to be through Above and Beyond. Pray about what you would like to contribute to make a difference in the lives of the families as we send our South Hills team to make a difference in our global campus in Kenya.
I don't know how you felt, but when I first watched that message from Moses, I thought, a cow for $265? I need to fly to Kenya and buy some cows and ship them home. Like, what's going on with that? By the way, one other thing. This Saturday is the Eagle Fun Days Parade, and every year that we've been a church, we've had a float in the parade. And because we're not boring, we don't do the dry part. We do, if you've never been to the Eagle Fun Days Parade, you're missing out. It's fantastic. The first half is like a regular parade. It's great, but it's just a parade. The second half is wet and wild. It's a giant water fight, and between the people in the parade and the people watching the parade. And so we participate in that. And so we'd love you to come down. The parade's at 1 o'clock, at least the wet and wild part is, and come down and squirt us with water and get squirted by us and cheer for us or cheer for the church or share people like, hey, that's my church, whatever. Come and enjoy the parade and support the church. I don't know if you've ever had that moment where you've gone to bed and out of the blue, before you drift off to sleep, your brain, your trusty brain, pushes a question to the front of your mind. And maybe for you, it's something important and pressing. You know, maybe it's very immediate, like, oh, did I turn off the burner? Did I blow out the candle? Did I lock the door? Whatever, you know. Yeah, that's my wife. But if you're like me, the question that your brain pushes to the front of your mind is usually something ridiculous. It's something more like was the villain from Die Hard, is that the same guy that's in Harry Potter? Like, is that, yeah, that is the same guy. Like, oh, am I taking the kids to that party tomorrow, or is that next week? Is that Thursday? I wonder what happened to the inconceivable guy from The Princess Bride. Like, what is he doing? Has he been in anything recently? Like, how old is Pat Sajak? I know he just retired. Like, what is going on? And you try to ignore it, right? And it's clearly information you don't need to know. What you need is to go to sleep so you can get up at a regular time, right? And so you try to go to sleep, you try to ignore it, but it just won't go away. And the longer that you lay there, the more persistent that question becomes, and the more that you think about it. And eventually, like, you give in and you roll over to grab your phone, but then you remember that it's plugged in across the room because you're trying to be less attached to your phone, right? And so you slip out of bed and you grab your phone and you Google it while you're sitting in the corner in your underwear. How old is Pat Sajak? The problem is it doesn't just end with the answer to that question, right? Because that answer only leads to more questions. I didn't know he was married to her. Like, wow, like, I thought his net worth would have been higher than that. Why, yes, I do want to see their Brentwood estate. Like it just keeps going. And it's right about then that your wife wakes up, and this is all hypothetical, by the way, and looks at you, and she's like, what the heck are you doing? And you're just like, I don't know. Did you know Pat Sajak is 77? Like, that's crazy, right? Like, he looks great. So those kinds of moments are embarrassing for a variety of reasons, but we all have moments where our behavior was driven by a nagging question that you just had to have the answer to, which, as it turns out, is actually true of us more frequently than we might realize, and certainly in more interesting and serious ways, and even spiritual ways. Because while you might be too sophisticated to fall down a Google rabbit hole about Pat Sajak or Inigo Montoya, like we all have things that we've done or parts of ourselves or our lives that we just don't fully grasp or understand or comprehend. I mean, we've all had moments where we've looked at ourselves, or we looked at things we did, or we looked at our lives and we wondered things like, why do I say yes to stuff when every part of me is screaming to say no? Why do I get anxiety every time they walk through that door? Or every time that conversation comes up? Why do I keep buying junk I don't need? Why do I push so hard and tend to be a workaholic? Why am I such a control freak? Why can't I seem to just say out loud with my words to the people that I love what I really want and what I really need? Why does it feel like I'm always trying to prove myself? Why in the world do I care about how many people like or comment on some stupid media post that I made? Why do I take responsibility for things that have nothing to do with me? And I could go on and on and on. And regardless of whatever it is about you that you might be struggling with or you might struggle with in general, and as pressing and as important as the questions that you might be struggling with might feel, the question for us this morning is, why bring up any of that here? I mean, what does it have to do with God or faith or church or the Bible? I mean, after all, there's some really big things happening in the world right now. And so it's easy, even in church, to spend most of our time talking about what's wrong out there and how God wants to change the world out there. But one of the great challenges is convincing people, or maybe just convincing ourselves, that the beginning is actually the beginning. Because the truth is, God changes the world one person, one life at a time. He changes the world by changing you and me. That your life changing actually leads to the lives of the people in your life changing, and that spreads out from your life. That the way that out there gets changed is in here gets changed. The work that God is doing in the world is brought about through the work that God is doing in your life, in my life. So when I was growing up, I'm not a video game person, never have been, mainly because we were too poor to have any game systems when I was a kid. And so it's great. I'm glad that I didn't have that opportunity. But the first video game I can remember sort of falling in love with and being really addicted to was the Super Mario Brothers video game that came out like in the mid 80s. And there was a gas station down the street from the apartments where we lived, and they had the arcade game in there. And I can just remember anytime I found a quarter, saved a quarter, got a quarter, I would go straight down to that gas station to play Super Mario Brothers. And it was a waste of a quarter because I was dead within a couple of seconds of starting that first level. But when you played Super Mario Brothers, I remember when we finally, like years, we always got like the game systems years and years and years after everybody else did. And so when we finally got our Super Nintendo system and we got Super Mario Brothers and started learning like how to beat it, and when you played Super Mario Brothers, if you knew there was some sort of tricks where you could bypass certain worlds, you could jump on, run over the thing and drop down some tubes, and you could skip most of the game and just sort of skip to the end to beat the game. Anybody remember what I'm talking about? Anybody know? Okay. Absolutely. And the truth is, sometimes when you're a person of faith, we think that coming to faith works like that. That we think that it allows us to skip huge steps in the process of becoming a full, healthy, whole, and complete human being that we're supposed to become, that who God created us to become. And it actually can be confusing because there are verses in the scriptures that kind of sound like that. So we talked a little bit in the last month about this statement in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 that says this. It says, anyone who is in Christ is a new creation. Old things have passed away. All things have become new. And this is this incredible, beautiful, we underestimate just how big and the scope of what's being said here. But it's this incredible declaration of the difference that Jesus makes in our life. But there's also this reality, I don't know about for you, but certainly for me that I've experienced, that even after you give your life to God, you still kind of seem stuck with the same you. The you that you knew before you believed. And I think when we read or we hear verses like that, whatever else we take them to mean, whatever else we sort of grab onto, part of our takeaway is that when we come to Jesus, that he somehow allows us to just sort of bypass or go around any process that might be necessary for us to grow or heal or change. I mean, I've had so many conversations with people who've given their life to Jesus, and they almost seem surprised that they have the same obstacles and challenges and barriers as people who don't believe in God. I've known tons, maybe like you, tons of incredibly gifted and talented and intelligent and passionate and disciplined and driven people who believe in God and who love Jesus. And yet I've watched them hit walls and run into obstacles and self-sabotage and get derailed emotionally and in their families and relationally and even spiritually. And they have no idea why or how that happened. If you have been a person of faith, a follower of Jesus for any length of time, you've probably had that kind of experience. And it's frustrating and it's defeating and it's hard to make sense of it. There's a collection of verses in Romans 7 that we revisit pretty often around here because they so perfectly capture the human condition, the human dilemma. It's in Romans 7 verses 15 to 20. It says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. But if I know that what I am doing is wrong, this shows that I agree that the law is good. So I'm not the one doing wrong. It is sin living in me that does it. And I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. But if I do what I don't want to do, I am not really the one doing wrong. It is the sin living in me that does it. What's interesting about these verses is that the guy who wrote these words is the same guy who wrote about how everything about us is brand new when we come to Jesus. And so when I read that, I think, wait a minute, his name was Paul. I think, wait, like you can't have it both ways, Paul. Like, which is it? Are you changed and brand new, or do you keep getting trapped in the same old patterns? And he would say, yes. Yes. And you can feel the tension in what he's saying, right? Because he starts out by saying, I don't really understand myself. I mean, if one of us says that, like we just kind of nod along because, well, obviously we all have moments where we don't really understand ourselves. But what's crazy is that the guy who is saying this, that this guy Paul is the one who wrote those words. Because not only is he extremely educated and intelligent and insightful, but when you begin to read through the New Testament letters that he wrote, like, it's obvious that he's incredibly self-aware. There's also places where he uses, like when he talks about his background with religion and being a Pharisee and a Jew, he actually uses the word faultless to describe how he had kept God's law up to that point in his life. Faultless. Like, that's quite a statement. On top of all that, he knew and understood Jesus and what he did in a way that we never will. Not just generally, but he had experienced it and lived it for himself, because he came to Jesus in a really powerful and dramatic way, and his life made a radical transformation as a result. Now, it's that same guy who's writing Romans, and he's going, I don't really understand myself. And as he's communicating this struggle, what I want you to notice that he's describing something really profound, something primal, something underneath the surface, something deep in his core that's driving his thoughts, that's driving his attitudes, that's driving his impulses. And certainly it's spiritual, and he actually talks about sin, and we're going to talk about that towards the end. But it's not limited in its impact to just his spirit. It's affecting his soul and his mind, his central nervous system, his emotions, even his body chemistry. And he recognizes and is admitting that there are times where he's not in control of himself. So while I was on vacation the last couple of weeks, I was doing some reading, and I ran across this article that talked about how behavioral science and neuroscience is telling us that we live as much as 95% of our lives unconsciously. 95% of what you do every single day is just unconscious. You don't think about it. You didn't make that decision. In other words, most of us, most of the time, are living simply by impulse, simply just on autopilot instead of by intention. It's as if that there's this personalized operating system for your life and for my life that's running in the background, and it's running the show. You think you are, but it is. And that operating system comes customized, pre-installed software for you based on your experiences and your family of origin and your personalities and all your quirks and hang-ups. And our external experiences are like commands for that operating system, telling it to run this script or to launch that program, dictating how we act and how we interact and how we react to the world around us. And it almost always happens without us being aware or conscious that it's happening. Which is why we have moments where we look back at something we did, something we said, some way that we behaved, and we go, why in the world where did that come from? Why did I do that? So then the question becomes, what's shaping our impulses? What is that operating system? What's the thing behind the thing? So my wife and I, we have a friend named Mike, and he's awesome. And he's a counselor and a therapist. He's spent a long time as a pastor. He's been a coach. He's done all kinds of things. He's just a really amazing guy. He loves Jesus, and he's obsessed with helping people live stronger, healthier, better lives. And last year, he began to write and talk about his 20 to 25 years plus of research and experience of working with people as a pastor, and as a leader, and as a therapist and counselor. And he began looking at everything that he had learned and observed, at all the years of research and data and the experiences, and it led him to begin asking this question. What if we're all living in an attempt at getting a single primal question answered for our life? A question that influences everything. It impacts our relationships with other people. It impacts our relationship with ourselves. It impacts our relationship with our emotions and our choices. And the more he began to dig into this, the more convinced he became. But what he began to realize is we don't all have the same question. And so he doubled down and started sifting through all this stuff. And what he learned from his research is that there are 7 questions that kept showing up over and over and over again, no matter how many people, no matter how wide the sample size was, that all of these questions, all of these core issues for people could fall in or be classified into one of 7 different categories. And what he said was, of those 7 questions, one of them is at the core of every single human heart. There's a trace of all 7 questions in all of us, but one of them is driving the bus. One is responsible for the majority of our emotional responses and our choices and our actions. And so we are kicking off this series, and we're going to be in this series all the way through the month of July and all the way through August. Kind of unpacking what the scriptures say and looking through the scriptures with this template and this framework. So here are the 7 questions that he says are driving all of humanity. Number 1 is, am I safe? Second one is, am I secure? Third is, am I loved? Fourth is, am I wanted? Fifth is, am I successful? Sixth is, am I good enough? And 7th is, do I have purpose? I'm like, couldn't you come up with a way for the 7th question to start with, am I? Come on. But do I have purpose? Now, one of these questions is the thing behind the thing that's driving everything for you. It just is. We happened to be at a workshop with him a couple years ago, and at the end of the workshop, he started sharing some of this with the group that was there, and it was very early on, and he had the questions, but he didn't have some of the other frameworks built around it, but he was just kind of sharing it, sort of, this is like a first pass at it. And as he began to talk about the questions and talk about their impact on our lives, and he listed out the 7 questions, there wasn't an assessment. We didn't have to suss it out. Both my wife and I looked, and we knew immediately which question is at the core of our lives. Very different from the two of us. But I knew immediately, oh my gosh, that is the thing that I care about most in life, is answering that question. And by the way, it's not good or bad, it just is. The problem is when we're unaware of what's going on. The problem is when we're unaware that there's an operating system. The problem is that when we're unaware that something primal is actually driving us, and we just deal with the surface stuff. See, we all have moments where we look back and like Paul, we go, I don't really understand myself. I can't explain why I did that. But like Paul, we don't actually have to live like that for the rest of our lives. So the goal of this series isn't to try to fix something, because the question isn't the problem. The problem is being unaware of what's going on inside of you and letting it secretly call the shots with how you respond emotionally and the choices you make and how you relate to yourself and to other people. And listen, if you're a Jesus follower, this is a huge conversation for us, because our highest calling in life is that we live in response to what Jesus has done for us. Part of what Jesus expressed in describing why he came in John chapter 10, he says, I have come that you might have life and life to the full. That you would have life beyond this life, but that your one life here would actually be maximized for the full life that I created you to live. See, there is nothing more God-honoring than a life well lived, than for you and I to become holy and fully ourselves, who God created us to be, to live and honor in response to him, for us to live completely free and become who God made us, was dreaming us to be when you were conceived. And to do that, for us to become that, you have to deal with what's going on at your core. Like, if your life is a tree, so much of the conversation, even in church, deals with the branches, right? It's trim this and chop that. It's don't drink so much and work on your relationships and stop looking at porn and lay off the Cheetos and chocolate. And like all of those things are like good and we should do them, except that last one. I mean, come on, more Cheetos and chocolate, I say. Thank you. This is the only amen that's happened today. But for us to live out the life that God created us for, you got to get to the roots. The scriptures refer to this as your heart. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, it says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. I love the way the New Living Translation says it. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for it will determine the course of your life. See, you got to deal with your heart. You got to deal with your core. You got to deal with your essence, because it determines the course of your life. You can trim the branches of your life all day long, and there is a certain amount of that that's necessary. But eventually, you got to deal with the roots. because everything you become grows from them. The quality of your life will be determined by what you do with the question that's at the core of your life. By the way, you do see these dynamics, these sort of primal, I'm not in control, why did I do that moments. You see those all over the scriptures and the characters of the scriptures and the stories of the people in the scriptures. You probably know a little bit about a guy named Moses. He was an Old Testament character. If you haven't, do yourself a favor. Just go read the first 5 chapters of Exodus this week. It is an incredible story. So his family, along with all the Jewish people, were slaves in Egypt. And he was born at a time when the king of Egypt had ordered that all the Jewish baby boys should be murdered upon being born. And through some pretty miraculous stuff from God and the wit and wisdom and ingenuity of his mama, because there's nobody with greater wisdom and greater ingenuity than a mama trying to take care of her kids, Moses isn't killed. He's placed in a basket and he's floated down the Nile River, where he's found by the king's daughter, and she takes him in and wants him for her own. Because he still needed to be nursed, she unknowingly hires his own mother to nurse him and take care of him when he's a baby. And when he got a little bit older, the princess adopted him as her son, and he grew up as the grandson of the king of Egypt. As he grows up and moves into adulthood, he becomes aware of his story, of who he is, of where he came from, that he's adopted. He becomes aware of his true identity, which honestly would be emotionally complicated enough, just the adoption piece of it. All of our children are adopted, and that is an emotionally complicated story that they have to make peace with as they grow up. And that would be complicated enough. But then you layer on knowing that his birth family and his people are enslaved. And it's not somewhere else. It's not somewhere out there. It's right over there. I've been in the palace my whole life, and the lady who gave birth to me is over there slaving away all day. Imagine how complicated that would be for you. Imagine the kind of questions you would have for God, for yourself, about what it would mean. Think of all the deep questions and emotions around ideas like being wanted or loved, around self-worth and safety and value and purpose. And we look at it, and if you've grown up in church, you know the end of the story, and you know how epic it becomes and who he eventually steps into becoming. And so it's easy for us to just go, well, it all makes sense because this is what God was doing. But just think about it from a human perspective for a moment. Because it all comes to a head one day when he sees an Egyptian beating another Jew. And so he loses it, and he impulsively murders the Egyptian. And we know it was an impulse. We know it wasn't premeditated because he had the dumbest plan ever. He buried the guy's body right there in the sand as if he would not be discovered. We've all watched enough true crime to know that's a terrible plan. Then he has to flee for his life. He ends up in a place called Midian. And he spends the next 40 years, 4 decades, 40 years of his life running from all of that, running from his past, from his calling, from his future, from himself, just trying to ignore all the questions that are screaming from his soul. I mean, just think about your life. Can you imagine living for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, stuck in the same places in your relationships, stuck in the same places in your habits, stuck in the same patterns of your life, living beneath the life that God created you to live? Deciding that, well, I guess this is just as good as it gets. This is just as good as I get. Can you imagine spending 4 decades of your life like that? Man, I can, because I have spent a lot of years just trying to ignore and push away the things about my story and myself that I can't get control of or make sense of. One of the things that I noticed in so many of the stories of the people in the scriptures, and honestly, it's true in the story of Moses, and it's something that haunts my soul. And part of the reason why it haunts my soul is because of my primal question. But it's this idea that God will let you choose a lesser life. You can believe in him, you can give your life to Jesus, and you can be a hot mess the whole time and never grow and never elevate and never heal and never change. You can live beneath what God has for you, and he won't reject you or love you any less. He'll continue to invite you to more. He'll absolutely try to move you down the path that he has for you. Like Moses, like your time in Midian won't be wasted, because he'll meet you there and graciously use that time to try to grow and prepare you for what he has for you, but he won't force you. See, it would be easy for the conversation to just be like, Moses, you're in Midian. Your life's pretty good. You got a wife, you got kids, you got a little bit of resource, you're a shepherd, you're herding cattle and sheep, and there's nothing wrong with that life. But I created you to be the deliverer. But if you want to herd sheep, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that life. If you want to live beneath the plan that I have for you, you can stay here. Because God won't force you. If you want to stay there, he'll let you live there. Now, what I'm not talking about is sin. Like, God actually absolutely confronts anytime that we step out of his intention for us when it comes to breaking his law, when it comes to breaking our relationship with him, when it comes to what it means to live out a healthy, God-honoring life. When we step into a sinful area, of course he comes and confronts us. Of course he says, come back over here. Of course he says, don't go that way. But Moses living in Midian, that wasn't sinful. He could have stayed there. So one day Moses encounters God, and when he does, God begins to heal and answer all those questions that were rattling around in his soul. In fact, if you read those first 5 chapters, you will read their conversations, and there's several of them. And God patiently answers every question of insecurity and inadequacy. And Moses is going, I'm the wrong guy. You found the wrong guy. You don't understand who I am or where I'm from or what I've done. I don't have the right gifts to do that. I don't belong there. If I go there, they'll kill me. Like, he had all of the reasons why. And it was a pretty good case. And God kept peeking behind all of those reasons and speaking into his soul. By the way, everything for Moses, once he began to move towards the life that God was inviting him into, not everything wasn't perfect from that point on. In fact, he still had lots of doubts and struggles and problems. He faced incredible challenges in confronting the king of Egypt, and even in leading the people of Israel afterwards, after the Exodus. And he would flip out and rage out and lose his temper and still do crazy things. But because God was beginning to address those deep, primal questions in his life, he became less and less explosive and impulsive. And over time, he became more and more peaceful and healthy and intentional in the way that he acted and reacted, in the way that he lived, in the way that he led, in the person that he was, in the way that he led his family, and in the way that he led the nation of Israel. See, here's the thing. It's one thing to be self-aware enough to see and know and admit to what you're doing. And that is like the place that a lot of us get to. Is like, we can be honest about what we're doing. But knowing why you do it, knowing why you do what you do, that actually is the key to doing and living better. Because when you know the question that's at the core of your life, when you know the thing that's driving everything that you do, you begin learning how to recognize how it's impacting you, and when it's hijacking a situation, and when you are absolutely like moving down this path because that question has come to the forefront. And you can begin to embrace the truth about who you are and what God says about you. And when you do, that completely changes how you live. In Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 to 17, that guy Paul that we talked about from 2 Corinthians and from Romans 7, he wrote these words. He says, be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Make the most of your life. Don't act thoughtlessly. Don't live 95% of your life on autopilot, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. I've probably read those verses hundreds, if not thousands of times in my life. He's writing to a church, and he's writing to people who are Jesus followers. And the issue, notice, the issue that he's addressing in this particular passage, it isn't sinful. It isn't a bad habit. Their relationship with God isn't at stake. But he's addressing how they're living and who they're becoming, the impact they're having, the legacy that they're leaving on their families, on their church, and on their community. That's what's at stake. And he says, be careful how you're living. Pay attention to how you're living. Not foolishness, but as wise. Don't live as a fool, live wise. Don't live thoughtlessly. Pay attention to the patterns of your life. Pay attention to the things that you keep repeating over and over and over again in your relationships. Pay attention to the things that you're prone to do. Don't live thoughtlessly. Don't just live according to the programming that you inherited. Don't spend 40 years of your life in Midian living a lesser life. Don't let your primal question dictate your life. I remember sitting in that workshop when Mike was talking about this stuff, and it began to shift everything for me. My primal question is the final one. It's the, do I have purpose? Really at the core of that question is, at the end of my life when I'm no longer here, did it actually matter that I lived? Did I have an impact? Is there any significance to my life at all? I've been haunted by that question my whole life. It's driven everything that I do. In the way that I relate to my family, both in healthy ways and unhealthy ways, it has driven everything. And the moment that I feel like the answer to that question for me is no, that I'm going to have lived and died and nobody's going to even have noticed, that it wouldn't have even mattered. Oh, it makes me hold back tears just thinking about it. That's how core it is to the way I'm wired. See, you and I will spend our lives searching for something, or we will spend our lives living from something. So you can live your life from safety, not for safety. You can live your life from security, not for security. You can live your life from the idea and the knowledge and the reality that you are loved far more than you can possibly imagine, not spend your life searching for love. You can spend your life living from knowing that you are wanted, not trying to discover whether or not you actually are. You can live from success, not for it. You can live from enoughness, not desperately searching for it. You can live from purpose, not trying to find if you actually have it. See, knowing why you do what you do is the key to going from living for, searching for, trying to find the for, to actually living from. And so here's the simple little ask I'm going to make. I'm going to invite you to take this journey with us. And it begins with a simple step. I'm going to invite you to take a short little assessment to discover the question that's at the center of your life. All you got to do is scan that QR code. If you happen to miss this slide, there's a little sign on the Connect table in the back. You can scan that QR code there. Take you a few minutes. Over the next 7 weeks, we're going to dive into every single question. We're going to look at what is God's truth for us in each of these questions, and what is the gift or the superpower that's wrapped up inside each of them, and how do we leverage it to build our lives instead of sabotage them? How do we leverage it to help people instead of hurt the people that we love the most? And maybe the best part of this whole series is going to be is that not only will it give you insight into your own life and your own soul, But it will also help you see and understand the people that you love even better, because there's only going to be 1 week that's specifically about you. And so the other 6 is you can actually come and go, oh, that's at the core, that's what's driving that person. That's how I know why they do what they do. It has huge, huge implications for interpersonal relationships. For instance, the question at the core of my wife's life is, am I good enough? The thing that we have spent, that I didn't realize, we have spent so much time in our life at odds about, is because she doesn't come out and say the words, am I good enough? But the thing that sets her off, the thing that gets under her skin, the thing that makes her feel threatened, the thing when she decides, okay, I need to take control of this, is when something's going on in our family, in our lives, between us, where she's getting this giant answer, you are not good enough. Finally, when we come to Jesus, when you open your heart to God and you step into a relationship with God, we've talked about this primal question, but there's an even bigger question behind that. See, there is one universal question for all of humanity. And when you step into a relationship with Jesus, that's the most fundamental, that's the cosmic, that's the human question. The question of sin, the question of brokenness, the question of, is there a God? Does he love and care about us? How do I live in relationship to him? What is his intention towards those? That question, that's the question that gets answered when we step into relationship with Jesus. And if you haven't experienced that, forget the primal question for a second. That's the most important question. What's going on between you and God? What's going on between you and your Creator? And that's the question that Jesus wants to answer for you this morning, if you have not stepped into that relationship. But here's the deal. Forgiving your sins isn't all that God wants to do in your life. I mean, that is absolutely, if nothing else happens, 100% the most important thing that could happen to you is you to be made new, to be forgiven, to be washed clean, to be reconnected to your Creator through faith in his Son, Jesus. But that's not all he wants to do in your life. Would you pray with me?
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that he's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that he can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.